Inc.com puts together a research report every year featuring the 5,000 fastest growing private companies in America. One of the companies vying for this honor is Florida-based sportsmemorabilia.com, a company that owns a generic category killer phrase searched tens of thousands of times a month on Google alone. We're going to speak to the founder about how he built this part domain into a multi-million-dollar venture. Stay tuned. 3 messages before today's show. First, if you're a domain name investor, don't you have unique legal needs that require domain name technical know-how and industry experience? That's why you need David Westlow of Wiley Ryan. Go search for David Westlow on Domain Sherpa, watch his interviews, and you can see for yourself that he is intelligent and articulate, can help you with buy-sell agreements, deal with website content issues and UDRP actions, and can even help you write your website terms and conditions. David Westlow is the lawyer to call for all your internet and intellectual property needs. See for yourself at newmediaip.com. Second, when you have questions about domain names, where should you go to ask them? The answer is dnforum.com. Not only is DN Forum the largest domain name forum in the world, but it's the best. You can learn about domain names in the industry, buy and sell domain names, talk about domain name news, and meet other domainers just like yourself. Register for a free DN Forum account and begin advancing your skills and knowledge today. And when you do sign up, send me a friend request so we can connect. My ID is Domain Sherpa. Finally, whenever I'm thinking of buying or selling a domain name, the very first place I go is Estebat.com. Their service provides quick and comprehensive information about the valuation and the critical factors that you need to know about, like other extensions that are reserved, recent sales, search volume, and cost per click rates on search engines. And if you haven't tried their lead generator service for domains you want to sell, you're missing one of the most powerful tools around. Those are the reasons I pay for the service every month. Here's your program. Hey everyone, my name is Michael Seiger and I'm the publisher of DomainSherpa.com, the website where you come to learn how to become a successful domain name entrepreneur and investor directly from the experts. Many domain name investors own great generic domain names and most of them are parked. That was the case back in 2006 when today's guest purchased sportsmemorabilia.com, but today the company does millions in revenue and leads the market in high-end autographed sports merchandise and memorabilia. Today we're joined by Jesse Stein, founder and non-executive chairman of sportsmemorabilia.com and a fellow Gaucho graduate from my alma mater, UC Santa Barbara. Jesse, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Michael.
So Jesse, I love my life, but I always tell people that UC Santa Barbara was 4 of the best years of my life, living in a student-only community called Isla Vista, nestled between mountains and the ocean. Do you look back and feel the same way?
Oh, I wouldn't have gone anywhere else. I remember I got into a couple of pretty good schools back east, but then I visited the campus at Santa Barbara, and I remember after the campus tour, going to the bookstore and buying a bumper sticker, knowing that that's where I wanted to go. I got back to cold Santa Fe, New Mexico, and put a bumper sticker on my 1964 Volvo, and that was it. Yeah, it was incredible.
Yeah. I remember it was one of the few schools that I did get into, and I showed up on the first day for orientation. I just remember, I've never seen so many beautiful girls before in one location in my life.
Yeah. Girls going to class in their bikinis, and it was incredible. It was like a dream.
It was. All right, Jesse. So you own a decent number of generic domain names. I want to learn about your background from your post-Santa Barbara and also your domain portfolio. But I want to start with a few questions about sportsmemorabilia.com, since that'll be the main focus of the interview, and I want to give the audience an idea of what they'll expect if they spend 45 minutes with us. So I read your recent write-up at Inc.com, and I'll link to it below this video so people can go and read it themselves. Was the article correct in listing $19.5 million as your 2012 sales revenue?
That's right. We did 19.5 million and that was from scratch. It was doing zero. I mean, the owner of SportsMem in 2006 was doing a couple $100 a month in affiliate revenue.
Yeah. And how many customers did you serve last year to generate that $19.5 million, roughly?
About Oh, that's a good question. 50,000, roughly 50,000 customers. No, no,
Wow.
no. I'm sorry. More like, I apologize. More like 100,000 customers.
100,000.
Yeah, that's
So,
right. Average ticket's about $195.
yeah. Okay, and $195, they're probably buying a single item.
Yeah, 1.3 items is the average.
All right. So that gives an idea about the average sale price and how many products they buy. Do you find that, a customer will buy one product this year and then come back 2 years later and buy one more product now that they know where to go?
Absolutely. So I mean, before us, there was really no authoritative source for authentic memorabilia online. And so we have our lifetime value is really high. People come back over and over again. Fully a third of our customers are repeat customers.
Wow.
We have customers who spend upwards of $100,000 a year with us, hardcore collectors, and they know, it's a very rare product offering because it's not a widget. It's not built with designed obsolescence in mind, like a vast majority of products. Instead, it's on the other end of the continuum, which is multi-generational use. So people hang this stuff on their walls, they collect it. It rarely goes down in value. It usually increases in value. And it connects them to a memory they love. So it's a very passionate consumer audience. And so this customer is coming back over again, especially the gifter. We get a lot of people who come back and buy that gift for their husband or boyfriend or whatnot. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun.
Great point. So for anybody that's, not from the U.S. where sports memorabilia is a major industry and maybe they're from some other country, let's say, how would you describe your overall business model? For example, is it like an eBay where you just pair together buyers and sellers, or is there some other business model involved?
Now, eBay is more of a marketplace, and we are a straight up e-commerce company, like, the way Amazon started before it launched its marketplace. So we have a number of suppliers. We have about 250 suppliers of memorabilia, and they act as drop shippers. So we'll take in an order for a product that they stock, and then we'll send them the order, and they'll ship directly to the customer from their facility. But everything will look like sportsmemorabilia.com. So the packaging, the UPS label, everything. And that's about half of our revenue is through drop ship suppliers. And then the other half is our owned inventory. And we realized as we were compiling sales data over many years that it started to make sense to bring certain items in-house. So 2 years ago, we started bringing in owned inventory. We started buying collections. And today, fully 50% of our revenue is from owned inventory. And gross margin is higher. We offer free shipping on all of those products. It's our framing operation is also adjacent to our warehouse. So if somebody orders an item at 4 p.m. Eastern, we get it out, and they have it framed, we can get it out that same day. So it's a pretty efficient operation. So fully half of the revenue is from owned inventory.
Nice. All right. So we're going to talk about what you started with as a business model for sportsmemorabilia.com and then dig a little bit more into how that model has evolved to, half drop shipping, half owning your inventory, and how you're actually projecting forward to find out what items are going to be most desired, highest profit margin, how you project out and I know you are doing a lot in that space, so I want to chat a little bit about that. But let's take a step back for a moment. I want to take a brief diversion and understand how you got to today. So you graduated from UC Santa Barbara, and we spoke just before the show that you and I graduated the exact same year.
Yeah.
And the next thing that I see on your online bio was that you were co-founder and CEO of a company called Soho Digital, an interactive, I assume, marketing agency that you grew to 200 clients, 35 employees, 32 million in annual revenues. Did you have another job between Santa Barbara and Soho?
Yeah. So I worked and lived in Japan for 6 years. My first job out of undergrad in 1992 was door-to-door sales in Japanese in Tokyo in a suit in August for for the largest temp staff company in Japan, a company called Pasona. I did that for a year. It was very humbling. They gave me the worst territories, and I just wasn't that good at it. It's very difficult to sell in a foreign language, not being Japanese, but I love humbling experiences. So it was great. I did that for a year, and then I was a journalist in Tokyo writing for Dow Jones for 3.5 years, and then kind of realized that I probably was never going to be Japanese. And so a good soft landing back to the U.S. was business school. I got lucky, got into Wharton. Did this.
I don't know any slouches getting into Wharton, Jesse. So you must have done pretty decently at UC Santa Barbara.
Well, I think it was luck, like a lot of things in life, but and a little bit of hard work. But got in there, did a dual degree program, did an MBA, and then I did at the same time an MA International Studies from Penn. Graduated there in '98 and worked for a supply chain software company in Dallas for 1 year. That was my last job.
Yeah.
And then in '99 started a company called smartcasual.com, which was an online retailer. Actually, before Google launched, started that company. It failed fast and hard. That's my favorite type of failure. Did the classic .bomb, started it. And
99. So it was just at the peak, right when all the craze was going on online. You're like, I got to get a piece of that. Smartcasual.com.
That's right.
Because you like to dress smart casual?
Yeah, well, maybe casual. I don't know if it's smart or not, but we did it, and it was with my two best friends since I was 12, Wayne Chavez and Adam Edelman, who are today very successful internet entrepreneurs in Boulder, Colorado. They have an incredible company called Intermundo Media right now, which is just growing like a weed. But in any event, the three of us started the company. It didn't work out, but I learned a tremendous amount. And that company was really the beginning of my SEO journey. So I learned a whole lot about, at the time, how to optimize on Yahoo for organic search. And I kind of took that knowledge and transplanted it into my next couple of companies. So I started an SEO consulting firm called Tidal Interactive, like Tidal Wave, TIDAL, and then Soho Digital at the same time. And Soho Digital grew and grew. And as you mentioned, it grew to $32 million in revenue, very, very nice EBIT margins. And we got lucky and sold it to a portfolio company of Insight Venture Partners in 2004. And meanwhile, right around that time, I started dabbling in health and beauty continuity. So I developed my own wrinkle cream and a couple of other products and started marketing those on the internet. And meanwhile, the SEO was going. So I was learning about SEO, and then through Soho Digital, learning about paid media, because that's all we did was paid media, mainly display media. And then with the wrinkle cream businesses, learning about continuity. And today, one of my businesses is a diet business. I have a website that's exclusively organic traffic. It gets a tremendous amount of diet traffic, brand searches, and then I sell our supplements through that website. But in any event, the Soho Digital sold, and I remember during the earnout, a guy said, "Hey, you got to check out this weird industry. It's called domaining." And he showed me this DN Journal website. And, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Ron Jackson, and for you for really reporting on this industry. And I looked at this thing and I said, this is so interesting. I never had thought of domain names as internet real estate, as real estate, digital real estate. And so I went to my first traffic conference. I think this was '05.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized I was late to the party. It was like being in Isla Vista, at 2 a.m. and going to a frat party, and they're pumping foam out of the keg,
Right.
and you're the last person there. And people like Frank Schilling and and others and Slavic and all these
And
guys.
Frank's going up to his room. He's got his arm over two cuties. Yeah. And you're standing there at the keg.
He's in a hammock in Cayman Islands, and and so I thought, well, I've got to do something different here. I can't, clearly the opportunity to algorithmically, buy domains using the add delete game, and doing what Frank and the others had done, that arbitrage is gone. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, maybe I can use my SEO skills and my ability to build out websites to buy a really good domain name and develop it.
Yeah.
And I really, at the time, I it was obvious that these names were real estate. If you could buy a beachfront property, and if you were a land developer, then you could build it into the Wynn Las Vegas hotel. And so I made a bunch of offers. And my investment thesis beyond anything else was buy an enthusiast category killing domain name. And so I really wanted the property to be underpinned by a passionate consumer audience, because I thought then we could harness, the power of community and content in addition to commerce, and then just create stickiness, create repeat customers and a real enduring business model. And so, made a bunch of offers, and the owner of sportsmemorabilia.com at the time, just was sick and tired of it, couldn't make any money from it, and he mercifully let it go for a very attractive price. And I ended up with this domain name. And I also realized that I knew nothing about sports. Sadly.
Well, if you knew nothing, oftentimes fledgling entrepreneurs will hear from seasoned entrepreneurs, find something you love, and then focus on that, and you'll either figure out a business model, or the money will come eventually, or something, but love what you do. So in this case, you bought a domain name that defined a purchase track. People interested in sports want to own a piece of history of their favorite team or players. And so why would you even, since you're not a sports fan, a self-professed sports fan, why would you even think about buying sportsmemorabilia.com?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for me, I actually have the slightly different advice or a different viewpoint, which is I love the puzzle of putting together a business and trying to figure that out. That's where my passion lies. And then we obsess over customers. And so if there's a passionate customer there, whether it's memorabilia or hammocks or bocce ball sets or lawn darts or whatever else, I think the important thing, at least for me, is the complexity of trying to scale a business. Mm-hmm. And so that's, and it just so happens that this is a really cool product that people love and hang on their walls for decades. And, that was more luck than anything else. And so the model really was to acquire this name and then to hire people, who could come in who were eminently more talented than I was in different, respects, and who had forgotten more about sports than I'll ever know.
All right,
and
so
I did.
Let me back up for a second before we get into how you hired the people and everything involved in that. But so how did you even pick sports memorabilia? Why didn't you choose something like bicycles.com or People love their pens and they'll pay $200 for a pen. And why wouldn't you buy pens.com? How did you pick sports memorabilia out of the thousands of different product niche, all the criteria you had around building a business on top of a product category killer domain name? Why would you pick that versus all the other domain names that were available?
That's a great question. It was really out of my control because a vast majority of the domain owners at the time, it's changed a little bit. The market has softened, but they were so irrational about the sales prices that I was interested in biking.com.
Yeah.
In fact, I ended up buying it 5 years later. But at the time, it was impossible. I mean, at the time, Rick Schwartz, right, was telling people, that forget about 10 times EBIT multiple. You got to think about 100 times EBIT multiple. Never let this real estate go. And I think, and I think Rick is great. I know him well, but I think that created a really irrational mindset,
right,
among and you could feel it in those rooms when you were at Traffic. I mean, people just thought that they had discovered electricity, and so it created this kind of warped sense of supply and demand, where even if someone comes to you with a really reasonable offer for your domain name, never let it go, because it'll just be worth so much more the next year. And in fact, quite the opposite turned out to be true when Google completely changed its quality scores and parking revenues, plummeted. And now I think there's a lot of people holding domains that they wish they had have sold. But the short answer is that very few people were willing to let go of their domain names for anything reasonable. And the guy who owns SportsMem, came to the table with something reasonable. And so I was lucky to get the name.
Could you have bought another domain name besides sportsmemorabilia.com and built a 19.5 2012 business on top of it?
I don't know. At the same time, I bought BeverlyHillsPlasticSurgeon.com. And, Alan Hack, who's fantastic, sold me that name. And he and I have done quite a bit of work over the years together. And, you never know what horse is going to win as an entrepreneur. At least I don't. I'm not smart enough. And so Beverly Hills Plastic Surgeon, was going to be a lead gen business for plastic surgeons in California and beyond over time. It was just such a strong name.
Yeah.
And so I went to the plastic surgery conference and built that out and created content and SEO'd it, but it was just a really difficult business model. And I just felt like Sisyphus rolling the boulder up the hill, and it was just difficult. And so, I like to go where there's a little bit more flow.
Yeah.
And SportsMem, from the outset, it took a while, and we're still, a relatively small business, a $20 million business. It's great, and we're very healthy and very profitable, but we have a ways to go. But, at the time, we SEO'd it, and I brought in Stefan Tesoriero and Mike Gallucci. And they are, the three of us are really co-founders of the business. And Stefan is CEO, and Mike is COO, and they're just incredibly talented, incredibly good at what they do. And we were lucky that the SEO worked, and we ranked, within months we were ranking #1 for the term sports memorabilia on Google. And then, within a couple of years, we were ranking #1 for basically any combination of team, player, and then if you add the word signed or autographed or memorabilia, and that's the case today. So that was, I think that was the secret sauce. That was the long pole in the tent. Yeah. That allowed us to scale the business, was the fact that we had all this free traffic.
Right.
It wasn't free
traffic, which you built using a lot of SEO techniques. But back to the domain name, could you have bought sportsmem.com? So it's not even sports memorabilia. How much more difficult do you think it would have been to build it off of a brandable domain name versus a generic keyword domain name?
Right. That's a great question. And I think that it's in the eye of the beholder, right? And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of beautiful brands out there, obviously, with Zappos and Amazon and eBay and the like that are not generic names. But I always believed in the power of a generic name, especially when you're self-funded and smaller, and you're trying to open up doors to suppliers and partners and later on investors and customers. And I think that there is tremendous value that is conferred by a category killing domain name that really has no real synonym. I think that's the key, is you can't buy a name that where then there could be 20 other words that would be similar to that name. With sports memorabilia, there's really nothing that completely defines the industry. And it happens to be a really important facet of our model, because sports memorabilia is all about authenticity, and we live and die by authenticity. And just our name alone confers that authority. And so I think in this specific case, it was huge, just owning the name. And once you own the name, no one else can.
Right.
So that's what's beautiful about it. So
Great
in this particular case, I think it's great to have the category killer. And within 5 years already, we're we're actually now in year 7. But we're gathering a lot of steam, and I think it's very difficult for competitors to catch up at this point.
Yeah, no, great point. And the Costello brothers said the same thing when I interviewed them about PalmSprings.com. When they call up an advertiser and they say we're calling from PalmSprings.com, it automatically generates authority on their behalf with the customer. How did you get that domain name? Clearly they've got their own perception of what it is versus Zappos. Hi, I'm Jesse Stein calling from Zappos. Well, what does Zappos do? Before, and that could have been the name for any business. So, great point that you get the keyword rich domain name. People are going to argue left and right whether it still has value today in the eyes of Google and other search engines. I think it still does. They've just decreased it for non-value-added websites, but clearly you have a lot of original content and great products that aren't replicated across many other websites. So they're giving you the value for that. Plus, you get the authority of the name that others can't get.
Yeah. Well, the misconception. So the Google the Google boost that you get from the generic name is less about the fact that you own the URL, the precise keyword match, and therefore Google ranks you higher. It's more that the people who end up linking to you use the anchor text in that link that is your name. And so that term appears much more frequently. And so Google then assumes that you're just the complete authority in that space. And so that's really where the SEO kicks in as a result of the domain name. Right.
Great point. So I want to touch on one more point before we get into the details of sports memorabilia. And I noticed that TritonCorp.com, where you have all of your other brands, you list them: biking.com, hollywoodmemorabilia.com, barbecuing.com, boating.com, yachting.com, hobbies.com, skiers.com. Phenomenal domain names. Do you, and you mentioned earlier that sports memorabilia hit and maybe another website that you tried to get up and running didn't hit. Do you notice that it's a numbers game? You have a certain number of irons in the fire, and some of them are going to take off, and you're doing the same sort of business strategy and assigning resources to them, but some of them work and some of them don't?
Absolutely. I think there's that. I think part of it is throwing a bunch of stuff against a wall and seeing what sticks. But another part of it, at least in my experience, is just focus. And just I'm convinced now that it's better to be really good at something and deep dive rather than being jack of all trades, master of none, which is my thesis with Triton. Was that we could take the same platform, the same people, the same processes, and map those over into other domains. And so what ended up happening in Triton, the issue is it takes time to SEO properties, and so there's this incubation period. Right, and it in a post-Panda, post-Penguin world, which were the two big, algorithmic changes over the last couple of years with Google, it's harder. Google moves a lot slower now. And so to build trust and authority in such a big category like hobbies.com or biking.com, it just takes longer now. So you have to plan on, if you're gonna spearhead your kind of business with, an SEO strategy, it just is going to take longer to get traction. And so it took longer than expected to get traction. And also, it's not just about mapping the processes from one business onto the other ones. You really need to hire customer service agents who understand biking, who are like cyclists and are avid and like pick up the phone and answer questions. And we need to look like credible in front of, suppliers of bike parts, et cetera.
Right.
And so you really need to hire people for each business that are passionate about that specific thing. And that takes a lot of focus, takes a lot of money. I would counsel somebody, if they were wanting to build out a larger portfolio of domains, to go out there, and that's where you want to approach, a private equity guy and put, $10 million plus on the balance sheet so you can really do it right and scale it. And so if you're self-funded, and, in sportsmemorabilia.com is a very inventory hungry business. And so a lot of the free cash flow from the business has been reinvested back into purchasing inventory, scaling up staff, et cetera. And so what we decided to do, and I have other ventures that I've been really lucky with. I mentioned the diet venture. I have a number of content websites that I've been building out. And, I decided that I was happier and I felt more fulfilled at the end of the week when I actually focused down on something. And someone came. One nice thing too is that, by owning a nice portfolio of domain names, you are going to have inbound inquiries, serious inbound inquiries. And I got one such inquiry about 6 months ago, where I sold hobbies.com and biking.com, and doubled my money, more than doubled my money on those, and ended up becoming good friends with the gentleman who bought the name, who happens to be a serial entrepreneur himself in the internet. So anyway, but the bottom line on that is, my recommendation to anybody is pick something good and really dive into it and stay focused.
So you wouldn't recommend, developing out 3 or 4 websites, putting a little bit of time and effort into each of them to get them up and running and see what sticks against the wall first before picking one to deep dive. You'd say pick one, deep dive in it.
Well, pick one, deep dive in it, and if it's not working out, fail fast and hard and move on.
Yeah.
So don't get stubborn. I've never grown attached to businesses because I think it's dangerous. And so if it's not working out, like Beverly Hills Plastic Surgeon, I found out within 90 days that thing wasn't working out, and very quickly moved on. Same with boating.com. Actually, boating.com bought that name and started building it, opened up a 9-person sales office, started selling into boat dealers and yacht brokers. Mm-hmm. And the real business there is in boat parts, which iBoats does a great job of, but It's a really big effort. And so I realized at the time, not that the model was flawed, but more that, wow, this thing really requires at least an additional $7 to $10 million in working capital to get going and to really hire the right staff and to scale it up. And I said, you know what, I'd rather just focus on SportsMem and go from there.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, so let's reverse back to 2006. You paid how much for sportsmemorabilia.com?
$12,500.
How did you determine that $12,500 was the right value for purchasing that domain name?
I think I offered just about that to this guy, David Bailey, and he was just looking for cash and very frustrated. I think it's good to get somebody who's fed up. with the name, or has really just kind of put it completely out of their mind.
Yeah.
And this guy, David, was ready.
Yeah.
And so I approached him, and I couldn't believe it. I honestly couldn't believe that I was lucky enough to buy that name for $12,500.
Yeah. How do you value a generic name like sportsmemorabilia.com today? If it wasn't a developed site and you had it parked and you were thinking about selling it or you're thinking about buying it, how would you value it today?
Like how much?
Yeah.
I think it's worth, assuming it wasn't a built-out property.
Correct.
It was just a domain name.
Right.
100 to 150,000. Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
is it just your past experience? You'd say it's a big enough market, knowing how much I could sell products for.
Yeah. It's $1.5 billion market domestically. I would look at, knowing what I know about the competition and, and just, it's an interesting, the more niche-y and enthusiast something is, I think the more interesting it is because you get all that passion
right
of that consumer audience. So yeah, I would say between 100 and 150.
Do you look at the analytics, like how many times it's searched per month and what the average cost per click is on Google or Yahoo or Bing and try and set a price that way? Or is it really just gut feel based on your experience?
Yeah, I definitely look at the keyword universe. It's the first thing I do.
Yeah.
Is I look at the whole, the universe of keywords, everything, and I'll add up the local search volume that you see there in the Google keyword tool. I'll go to compete.com, to Hitwise, and take a look at competitors. I'll look at Alexa rankings within the industry and see how many players are there, and then just try to get a sense of how big the market is domestically, and then how difficult, like how competitive the pay-per-click landscape is, and then how competitive the organic landscape is, and then and then it becomes feel, and it becomes like, am I well positioned to build this thing out? Because it could be awesome.
Right.
Like I own baby formula, babyformulas.com, and it's a great domain name, and it's crying out for, the diapers.com guys did a pretty good job, right? And so it's crying out for development, but it's just all a matter of bandwidth.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I plugged it into estabot.com, which values only the domain name, not the business. It doesn't know what your revenue and your EBITDA is or anything like that. And they valued it at 106,000. So right around the order of magnitude that you think it is.
Yeah.
So once you bought it in 2006, what was the first thing that you did?
Overlaid a website onto it. So replaced the website that was there with a commerce site. So hired a programmer. So the most important thing I think you need to do if you're developing out a website is find a rock star programmer and make that programmer your business partner, and really treat that person well and have a great collaboration with that person. And then I think the next thing was a great partnership with a great SEO engineer. And so did that. Those were the two first people, along with Stefan, the CEO, because I needed the sports expertise.
Yeah.
And we just kind of went from there. So we overlaid.
So was it in that order? You hired a programmer who was able to get the site up. Then you brought on a SEO expert that was able to then optimize and figure out a strategy for producing content that was search engine optimized. And then you brought on Stefan, who had the experience in sports memorabilia.
Yeah, that was roughly the order, and started generating content right away.
Yeah.
And so what you want to do is just figure out what the architecture of the website is. So just all the categories, and then create the website. And at the time, I went really fast to the 2 or 3 largest suppliers of memorabilia, took meetings with them. And again, that's where owning the category killer makes all the difference, like you say. So I called up Steiner Sports and said, hey, just bought sportsmemorabilia.com. I know nothing. I do know a thing or two about the internet, but I'd love to meet with you. And they supplied us right away. And so did Mounted Memories, which was one of the largest guys. And we got those two guys right away. We launched a website, uploaded the product feed, started generating unique content to put on each of the pages. So Google would start to like the site. And then, it just kind of went from there.
Who wrote the content? I understand that you and Stefan and the SEO guy got together and you said, well, we need every team in there and we need every player on every team and we need the keywords autograph or whatever other keywords that you said. And so you figured out what your taxonomy would be. And I think I read that you produced additional content, like how do you value a signature on a baseball, or how do you, various generic articles related to sports memorabilia that people are searching for to bring them to your site. So I understand that, but that's a lot of work. How did you produce all of that content?
Yeah, so the content piece was we found freelance writers through Craigslist. And today we have a network of about 150 writers who are on call, and we paid them per article, basically. And we currently have about 25,000 articles up on the website. So most of them you have to drill into a very specific page, and you'll scroll down and you'll see it's more like a blurb. It's like a 250 word blurb. So my advice is to create a substantial piece of content. It's got to be 100% original on each page. And you do that, and it's going to not only help with SEO, but it's important for pay-per-click as well because it boosts your quality score. And so all things equal, you have to pay less for a click than your competitor will over time, and that's huge.
Now, 250 words is not very much, and I thought I remember Google, one of the updates, looking at short content as just SEO'd content, not really of value. Did you notice that your site took a hit last year when Panda or Penguin came out and you didn't have content that was long enough?
Actually, great question. That was more, so that piece of it was more targeted at the content farms like eHow,
right,
Expert Village, all these guys that all it was content. There was no product. There was nothing else. And Google uses, because Google owns Chrome, right? So it now has all this browser data. So it was also looking at bounce rate. It was looking at, average time spent on the site, average number of pages visited, and noticing that people were going to these content farms and it'd be like a 90% bounce rate. People just leave, or average 1.1 pages visited. So I think what they did with our site, we actually gained traffic in Panda and Penguin because there's so many positive quality indicators on our site. People come and they end up, drilling deep into the site. They end up reading multiple articles. They end up checking out and buying something. And so Google could tell that this thing was real. And it gives you a massive benefit of the doubt when you're an older website. And so our site has been continuously launched since 1996. So, so I think it said, there's enough quality indicators here that will give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, that makes sense. Would you today, if you were doing the same thing, go back to Craigslist and find people who are passionate about the topic in certain geographies rather than going to Elance or odesk.com or any of those other websites to find writers?
Yeah, I like Craigslist because you can target, for example, college towns. You could target maybe not as targeted as Isla Vista, right? But you could, you could do Madison, Wisconsin,
right?
And you just find tons and tons of journalism and English students who want to make some extra cash.
Yeah, great idea. So it seems like bringing on a programmer, bringing on an SEO expert, bringing on Stefan, who has the industry expertise and has worked at a I believe a professional sports team or.
Yeah. He had worked at a couple of professional sports teams. And then Mike Gallucci had played sports at a collegiate level. He was actually an intern with us while he was going to Ohio State. And so
it seems like that would be a lot of capital necessary to start up this venture.
Yes.
Were you able to bootstrap that yourself because you did have a successful exit prior?
Yeah, so that definitely. So that's, the more, obviously, it goes without saying that the more of a nest egg that you can, cobble together, the more options you have, and the bigger you can go, and the more more failures you can have, the more bulletproof you are. And so I was very lucky, I had had that exit. And before that, cash flow generating businesses. And so it allowed me to, invest in sportsmemorabilia.com and then and also be able to take risks on stuff like Beverly Hills Plastic Surgeon and many other domain names, take risks on Triton and buy all the Triton domains. At the same time, I was launching health and beauty products. And so I think it allows you to just be more comfortable with risk if you have that cash.
Right.
And so, and also I just doubled down because of it every time, because I was lucky. I didn't need distributions from the business. I've never taken a salary. Here we are in year 7. I've never taken a salary from the business because for me, this is the best and highest use of my cash. Why would I take it out when I can just reinvest it and grow the business? It's better than earning 1.5% in a CD.
Because you own equity in the business, so you're increasing the value of your equity at a much faster rate.
Right.
So when you brought on Mike and Stefan, and what's your programmer's name?
Keith.
When you brought them on, did you just pay their salaries outright, or did you give them a piece of the company, or what convinced them to come on to this fledgling company that had a great domain name?
Sure. Well, I think it was definitely an exciting adventure for everybody. And, it was clear that the internet was here to stay. It was some years after the April 2000 crash and Web 2.0 was beginning. And I think it was clear to people that this thing was, had legs. And so, but I gave them a piece of the business and also flexibility. Keith, who is the most talented programmer I've ever worked with, he was allowed to work out of his house in Pennsylvania for many years, and he's with us now in Miami. But offer them flexibility and a real internet type culture, but also like they have a significant piece of the business. I gave away nearly 20% of the business to about a dozen executives, and and that was one of the best things I ever did. It allows me to design my own lifestyle. It allows me to be entrepreneurial, and it's really important to me that the people working in the business really are owners, not just feel like owners, but they truly are owners, and they have skin in the game, and they can make that mental calculation when they see comparable companies exiting for a lot of money. They can map that back to their own equity holding and say, wow, this is actually really significant.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I appreciate you saying how much equity you gave to how many people, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs want to do partnerships with other people, but they're not sure. Do I need to give 50%? Do I need to give 10%? Is 2% too much? And so 20% to 10 executives, it's a $20 million company today. If you can grow it to 200 million at a decent profit margin, and you're looking at the multiples that similar companies are exiting with, they can calculate how much their equity is going to be worth upon exit.
That's right. I think that's really important. I think for me is the more you give, the more you get in that sense. I mean, I'm still going to be hopefully savvy about it because I'm the one taking on all the risk, and I'm the one who's funded everything. And I, started the thing and bought the domain. But at the same time, and I think you really need to key it off of where people are in their careers. And so if someone is one of the top people from Microsoft and you're bringing them over, it's just a different equity calculation than someone who's just out of college, for example. So I think it's important to really make the calculation. So the number, if you exit, the number in their mind is truly meaningful.
Right. And do you require vesting of that equity over a time period?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
How long is that time period, Jesse?
4 year.
4 years?
Yep.
Okay. Your first year in business. So you brought on the team. They got a website up and running. You called up some distributors, I guess, or producers of this memorabilia, and you said, we can sell it through our system. They gave you the meeting because you had a great domain name and you had a team in place and the internet was taking off and they knew they didn't want to pass up that opportunity. You got the product. You were able to sell it. Do you remember what your first year's revenues were?
I want to say $60,000.
So how did you not think that $60,000 after a year of work and all the investment, paying salaries, paying for the development and everything, why didn't you look at 60,000 and say, I need to change businesses because this one isn't going to be a winner?
Yeah. Well, it started in June '06 and I think we did 60 grand or I don't know, 80 grand that year.
By year end. Okay.
But it started from nothing, right? And so you need a lot of traffic to produce a sale. I mean, usually 98 and a half, out of, 100 people who come to your site leave without buying. And so you just need, and this is out of qualified traffic. You need very qualified traffic and a lot of it. So it just takes time to gather steam with Google. Mm-hmm. And so, the first several months, that's exactly what it was. But it was clear, just the frequency of orders, it was clear that if that kept up, that that the snowball would turn into, something interesting.
Okay, so you saw the velocity of the sales increasing over time. So even though $60,000 may not seem like a lot for 4 people working on a site plus a team of contractors writing content, you saw it increasing over time and you knew that you were heading in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
If you would have seen one order happening per month or one order per week or whatever and it was stable through the end of the year, might you have thought maybe this isn't the right business?
Yeah. If within 6 months, like if that frequency of orders wasn't getting, more interesting, then absolutely. What happened was it was like an order a week, to start with, and then it was an order a day, and then it was several orders a day all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. And that's where we said, you know what, you just extrapolate this out and this is going to be really interesting.
How did you determine what your average profit margin was going to be when you were analyzing whether this was a business that you wanted to get into?
Yeah, so I think, in e-commerce, in something where you're shipping a tangible product that arrives to a consumer's house in a box, I think you want to think about 50% gross margin. Okay. Once you start dipping lower than that, it's really difficult, especially to buy paid media, and make the numbers work. Very hard. And so you need to be there, and then you need to figure out ways to, increase retention, loyalty, and upsells, cross sells, and then, and then even just take that 50% gross margin and how do you get that higher? And so what we did was, for us, the natural couple of upsells were framing and display cases. Mm-hmm. And so we start with framing. We started with outsourced framers, and then a couple of years ago, we brought that in-house. So that's a great business, very high margin business. 40% of customers who buy a photograph end up getting it framed. About 25% of people who buy jerseys get those framed. And
so I come on your site, I'm going to buy a jersey for $400. You bought it for $200. So I've got it in my cart for $400, and you're saying, hey, wait, you can buy a frame for an additional $150.
That's right.
And you make even greater profit margin on the framing.
That's right. The framing actually starts at $250, and then we have a deluxe version that's $300. And the great thing is it's a total win for the customer because we have so much scale compared to the small memorabilia businesses that we buy a lot of product, and we can offer a $250 price point where if you took it to a local framer, we've done that before, and they won't do it for under $500, $600.
Right. And plus you've got expertise in doing that. You're going to pin it the right way. It's going to be the right type of frame. And yeah, definitely. Awesome. So we talked about equity. We talked about marketing through search engine optimization, how you built up that content. Did you do any other type of marketing? You mentioned that you have expertise in display advertising. You were doing buys for your clients for years. Did you do any display marketing, any pay-per-click marketing through Google?
Yeah, absolutely. So SEO is only about a third of our traffic now. And so we do all the above. We do comparison shopping engines, we do pay-per-click, we do what are called product listing ads in Google. We run retargeting, we run display. We have a pretty robust affiliate program.
Wow.
We do email in-house. And then, of course, as you grow, you get more and more type-in traffic, which is the most valuable traffic there is. So,
yeah. Wow. You're pretty much covering all your bases with marketing. How big do you think you can grow sportsmemorabilia.com?
I think it's $100 million top line business,
Yeah.
a very profitable $100 million top line business. No problem. It's $1.5 billion market. eBay has, probably about 40% of that market. And then Amazon's marketplace has a decent percentage of that market. You still have about 2,500 offline memorabilia stores. You have pure play competitors like Steiner Sports, pure play in the sense that all they do is memorabilia. You have Mounted Memories and hundreds of other smaller websites. We believe that we can do, without breaking a sweat, $100 million within 3 to 4 years.
Nice. And then all of those big companies that you mentioned might be potential acquirers in the future when they want to own a category for their marketplaces.
Yeah, some of the big guys. I mean, one thing is we're not. This has never been built for an exit. This is really such an interesting business that we really build it, and investors, ironically, investors love this, right? When you're building a business not to be acquired,
right?
You're actually building it so that it's an enduring business model, so it's sustainable, so it'll be around in 20 years.
Right.
That's the way we're building this business, and we've had several, serious inbound inquiries, of course, from private equity firms and the like. But we're happy being standalone. We think there's a lot more growth ahead of us. So, why would we sell now?
Right. So how did you decide to stock product a year or two ago rather than just operating your platform as a drop shipper like you did originally?
So we were drop shipping, and then you can never fully control the customer experience with the drop ship model. And you can never really control specifically, the shipping window. And so you're going to get customers who complain and they blame it on you. They're not going to blame it on your supplier.
Right.
And you're never going to get full transparency into margin either if you're just relying on dropship suppliers. You don't really get pure competition that way. And so when you go out and you start buying inventory, you can do all kinds of things. You can be a lot more flexible with sales. If you know that you're going to sell 100 autographed Derek Jeter baseballs, this year, you can go and shop that around. And it's, you can command obviously a much better baseballs when you go to a supplier saying we'd like to buy 100 of those baseballs. You bring the balls in, and then we have a photo studio, and so we take beautiful photographs of all of our in-house inventory. We get great rates with UPS, and so we offer free shipping on all of our in-house inventory. The framing is all in-house. And so what it boils down to is we're able to, as I mentioned before, it's a rare promise for a smaller e-commerce company. But if you order before 4 p.m. Eastern, we will ship it out that same day, no matter what, no matter whether it's December 12th or February 14th.
Yeah, fantastic. So I looked at a few of your other websites in addition to sportsmemorabilia.com, biking.com, boating.com. It seems like you're using the same platform that you've built, but with a different logo and different categories and maybe some different price points. Is that correct?
Yeah, same platform, same technology, same everything, same designers, same programmers.
And how are the other sites doing compared to sportsmemorabilia.com?
They're kind of dormant. Like I alluded to, I really these are not small undertakings. The boating industry is huge, biking is huge, hobbies is gigantic, and so I think I bit off more than I could chew, honestly, and I realized that. And when I really realized it is just that I wasn't happy doing it. I wasn't happy, being the plate spinner on the Ed Sullivan Show, spinning a plate on my nose and my hand, and it just wasn't fun. And and so those sites are a little bit in cryogenic freeze. I kind of mentioned that we sold hobbies.com and biking.com to a guy who is going to do a great job focusing down and building those properties. And meanwhile, the others are just kind of there. And I like having those as option value later on because they're just wonderful domain names. They're in Google's good graces. We continue to add content to those sites. And so they continue to percolate in Google's index. They continue to mature and get more authoritative. And so to me, there's no downside really.
Right. Are there transactions that are completed through those websites? Are there products for sale?
Not anymore. It was too distracting to our warehouse to all of a sudden get an order for a boat part and a bike derailleur.
Right. Got it. All right. So I wanted to ask you about your title, founder and non-executive chairman.
Yeah.
What is the I've never heard of that before. You often hear founder and chairman, founder and CEO. Yeah. What does non-executive chairman mean, and how does that work with your other partners on the business?
Sure. So basically, I really want to let them know that they're in charge operationally, and I want to let prospective investors know that too. And if you want to exit a business or sell minority or do a recap and be able to step out of the way, it's really useful to have a non-executive chairman title because it says that you're happy to roll up your sleeves when necessary and add value where you can, but that you're just not operationally involved in the business. And so that's really where that comes from.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I experienced the same thing back in 2008 when I was looking to exit from my media company. But you have no plans to exit. And you haven't, I believe you said that you haven't taken any investment. Is that correct?
Haven't taken a dime, no.
Yeah, so why the positioning on the title, I just wonder?
Yes, I talked to enough people who had done exits,
Yeah.
and they said, you know what, you may want to think about changing your title if you really like, taking off to Colorado at a moment's notice and making your own schedule and all that type of stuff, which is really important to me, just to have that flexibility.
Yep.
I mean, of course, I'm not above hard work and I do it every day, but the flexibility and the options is what's really important to me right now in my career. And so I did that, and I also did it to signal to my executive team that they're in charge.
Yeah.
They're the ones, if you go to sportsmemorabilia.com and about us, I'm at the very bottom. Yeah. And so let them know, hey, they're the ones.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. You want them making the decisions. It's their business. They feel like they're responsible for the decisions they make. They take accountability. So here's the final question, Jesse, and I realize it. So I want to point out for the audience, it's past 5 o'clock East Coast time. I reached out to Jesse last minute, and he was gracious enough to come on the show. It's actually Valentine's Day, so I am especially appreciative because you're spelling Valentine's Day with me rather than your wife and your family.
No problem.
Fella gaucha, though. You can't.
Flowers will arrive at your house in a few minutes.
Exactly. So here's the last question that I have, Jesse. Oftentimes I talk with other entrepreneurs who have had successful exits, and they look at the business that they built in the past, and then they think about if they were to rebuild the business today, and they think how difficult it is. I want to get your take. If you were buying sportsmemorabilia.com today and you followed the same game plan, you wanted to figure out your content structure, build a ton of SEO, go build your partnerships to get the products to bring onto the website, do you think it would be harder or easier or the same today than it was in 2006?
It'd be the same. I think it'd be the same. I would focus more. I would get less distracted with Triton. I think Triton, and I don't view anything as a failure. It's always a learning experience. It's always meant to be. I really believe that, but I would have just focused down more just on SportsMem. And I also think that as I look back on businesses, I've exited 2 businesses now. I exited a health and beauty business in 2008. And I think I would choose to hold and build businesses rather than exit, because people forget. I mean, they look at the exit as the holy grail because, there's this liquidity event that's, taxed favorably and all this stuff that happens all at once. And it's great, but I think there's a lot of value in owning a long-term cash generating asset that can, by the way, that you can exit for more money later on if you choose to.
Right.
So, so I'm a big believer in just building great assets that generate cash.
Yeah. Definitely. Jesse Stein, founder and non-executive chairman of sportsmemorabilia.com. I want to thank you for taking the time to come on domainsherpa.com and share your insights for how you built sportsmemorabilia.com from a $12,500 domain name up to $19.5 million in 2012. And I wish you and your team continued success and growth in the future. Thanks for coming on and being a Domain Sherpa.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. You're my Valentine, Jesse. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Bye.